Hey guys, before I begin, the second part of Night of the Living Dead review, it will be out. I am still editing that, but I'm going to be releasing this before the second part's out, but it is coming. Anyway, I got it. I'm really liking graphic novels and comic books lately. I'm getting really into it. And what has gotten me into this is The Walking Dead. And currently it's my favorite comic book series, so far at least, and I have a good feeling it's going to be my favorite and definitely stay probably in my top 5 no matter what. It's great. So yeah, I wanted to basically, like Night of the Living Dead, do a synopsis and review type thing for each volume of The Walking Dead. So of course we're going to be starting off with Volume 1. This volume is called Days Gone By. So yeah, let's get into it. So on the first page, the very first page, we're introduced to two police officers, and they're in a shootout currently. This is of course Rick and Shane. Rick is our main character, if you don't know, but Shane, well, we'll see what happens to Shane soon. Anyway, Rick ends up actually getting shot, and then our very next page, he's waking up from a coma in the hospital. He wakes up and he calls for a nurse and everything, but nobody's responding, and so he starts walking around, and the whole place is looking totally decrepit. And then he finds a door. It's tied up, and he wants to see what's up, so he opens it up, and of course, there are a bunch of zombies in the room. Rick freaks out and he starts trying to talk to them and telling them to stop and back off because he doesn't know what's going on. Of course, they're not paying any attention and they're just chasing him, and they keep chasing him. One falls on him, but he doesn't get bit or anything, and he ends up being able to escape, and he uses his belt to tie another door off behind him. As Rick's walking back to his house, he comes across a really decayed zombie, and he's really affected by it, but anyway, he picks up a bike, rides to his house, and his wife and son are not there. So I'm sure Rick is just looking for signs of anywhere they could have went or anywhere he can find them, but he really doesn't find anything, and then he gets hit in the head with a shovel. And we see a man and a younger boy, and the man is telling the boy, this one's alive, it's not a zombie. Next page, and Rick's waking up, and he's in a house that the guy and his son are staying at, and the guy invites Rick to dinner, and they talk for a little while, but then Rick reveals that he was a police officer and stuff, and that he has the keys to his police station with him, and that they might be able to get like cars and even guns if it's needed. So then they're at the police station, and Rick unlocks it, and it turns out it really hasn't been raided at all, and Rick opens the armory, and so they both get some guns and ammo, and they both get cars, and Rick parts ways with Morgan and goes on his way to Atlanta to try and find Carl and his wife Lori. And on his way, Rick comes back across that decaying zombie that was just sitting there not being able to move or anything, and Rick shoots it. And then he cries. I'm sure, of course, this is supposed to mean something, like Rick realizes this thing is helpless, it's just sitting there, it's not a human anymore, and it's better to just put it out of its misery. And it's at that point that ends the first issue, guys, so it's at this point I should probably tell you. This series actually is black and white, and that issue was actually the 10th anniversary edition, which the original artist colored specifically for that issue. So now on, it's going to be black and white. Rick runs out of gas on the road now, starting on the second issue, and so he has to walk. He comes across some house, and he knocks on the door. He tries to see if anybody's home, what's going on. He goes into the house, he smells something really bad, and then he sees basically the whole family is dead with shots to the face, and it looks like one of the guy killed his whole family and then killed himself, basically. Then Rick actually goes to the barn, he finds a horse, and he takes that horse, and then he starts riding the horse to Atlanta. On the way to Atlanta, Rick kind of has a period where he talks to the horse for a while, but then we get to the city. Rick goes straight into the city, not knowing what really to expect, and then he gets swarmed almost immediately. However, the zombies go after the horse because it's way bigger and it has a lot more meat, so there's only a few zombies that are even noticing Rick, so he's able to get away, and plus, that's when we're introduced to this guy Glenn, who helps Rick escape. So they end up doing some sweet parkour, And Glenn reveals that the cities were actually really quick to, become infected and everybody to die pretty much because of so many people in one location, and they were all kind of closed in. Basically, a few people in those groups were infected, and they didn't know what would happen. They ended up, becoming zombies and then infecting everybody else. So they all ate each other basically. When Rick hears that news, he basically immediately is thinking, oh my god, Carl and Lori, they must have died. They might have died. I really hope they didn't die, because that's the only place that Rick knows that they would have went. It's almost certain they went to Atlanta. Atlanta's completely overrun. So basically Rick has almost no hope. But it turns out the people that Glenn is staying with actually happen to be Lori and Carl are part of the group. So then we're introduced to the whole group. There's a few people. We get introduced to a bunch of characters. This is clearly going to be our group for a little while. But yeah, Lori and Carl are with Rick now, once again. Yeah, I know that really would not happen in real life. There's almost no chance. Basically, because Rick definitely would not have made it in the hospital. If something like that had happened in real life, it's almost certain he would have just been eaten while he was in a coma. So it's really unlikely that he would be able to find Lori and Carl, but it's not too crazy that they happen to be with that group because it is right outside of Atlanta, and there was a lot of traffic. I think is really the case why they weren't in Atlanta, because everybody was trying to get in Atlanta, so they weren't in Atlanta when it happened. They were right on the outskirts, and the camp is right on the outskirts. And I don't know if I said this at the beginning of when I just started talking, but that's the end of the second issue there. Okay, so we're starting off issue 3 now, and Shane is also there. Shane is the one who brought Lori and Carl. He was with them, and he was trying to help them out. And some things come up with that in a little bit. If you don't know about them, we'll get to that very shortly. Shane introduces Rick to everybody. We have Dale, Glenn, of course. We have Alan, his wife Donna, and their 2 kids, Ben and Billy. Then we have Carol and Sophia, which is her daughter. And we also have Jim and Andrea and Amy. Then Lori and Rick talk for a while, of course, because they're married and they haven't seen each other in like weeks, and they thought each other were probably dead. Anyway, Rick falls asleep. He wakes up. You can tell he's so happy that he's found them. Clearly he's a good guy, and he has a happy family. And then he takes a shower. But once he gets out of the shower, Dale actually warns Rick about Shane. And Rick doesn't buy it. Rick is like, whatever, man. You don't even know. He's my best friend. But then Rick and Shane get ready to go hunting, and then we have a scene with all the women doing laundry in the river. And we also have a scene with Carl and Sophia, who have become friends in the last couple weeks since the outbreak started. Then we go back to Shane and Rick, who are hunting, and Shane basically thinks that it's going to be over soon and that the government's going to come in and finally deal with it and it can all go back to normal. But Rick woke up in the hospital where everything was messed up, and he went through his city where everything was messed up, and Atlanta too. So he's starting to think that he doesn't know that a lot of things look messed up and that it looks kind of almost irreversible. So we can already see they are on opposing viewpoints with a few things already. They come across a walker who's eating a deer. Back to the women doing laundry again, and we get some more character building, some more backstory of how Rick and Lori met. But then on the way back to the camp, a zombie comes behind and sneaks up on Donna and gets a hold of her, but luckily Dale is able to save her. Back to Rick and Shane again. They're basically talking about the zombie while they're looking at it. Then they hear a gunshot. It's just Bob finishing off the zombie that Dale cut its head off because it was still alive. And Rick is, of course, really shaken about what has happened. So he runs to Lori. He makes sure she's okay. He makes sure Carl's okay. And then when he's hugging and holding Lori, we see Shane is getting a little bit jealous, a little bit envious, and that's the end of the 3rd issue. Alright guys, we're just going to keep moving along here, and basically starting off the 4th issue, Shane's keeping watch. They have people keeping watch in rotations and stuff. It's nighttime, middle of the night, everyone's pretty much asleep. Shane's keeping watch. But Rick goes up to see Shane. They end up talking, and they get into a pretty big argument again about whether they should stay in the camp right outside of Atlanta where all the zombies are. Rick doesn't want to be that close to all those zombies. Shane, he thinks the government, of course, is going to come in and save them in a couple days, so he just wants to stay there. And so, yeah, they get in an argument. It's starting to get a little more tense, and yeah, they get in a bit of a shouting match because they even wake Dale up. Anyway, then we move to the next morning, and Rick is asking Glenn, because Glenn's the one who runs into the city to get as much supplies as he can. Rick asks him, do you know about any gun stores? Basically, they go to Jim. Jim tells them where a gun store is, so they get ready, Rick and Glenn, to go out and get some guns. And of course, Lori is mad at Rick, and she's worried about Rick. She doesn't want him to go because he's just gotten back, but Rick basically tells her, I can handle myself, I'm gonna be okay, and she reluctantly lets him go. Anyway, Glenn and Rick are heading off. Glenn says shit, pretty much. The gun store is really far into the city, much farther than even where he found Rick. And Rick comes up with an idea. If you've seen the show, he comes up with the idea to rub the zombie guts on him because basically he has the suspicion that they work with smell and all that stuff. So Glenn and Rick, they get into the city. They see that it's actually really bad in there. There's a lot of zombies. They even see a tank that was overrun. Rick picks up a shopping cart and stuff, and they break open into the gun shop, and it turns out it's pretty much unscathed. Nobody has really taken anything from it, so they load the shopping cart up with guns, and then they fill up with a bunch of ammo too. So they start walking back, and then it starts raining and washing off the zombie guts, and they're still in the middle of a bunch of zombies. So they start making a run for it, and Glenn ends up dropping the fucking cart, but he's able to pick up a lot of the guns and ammo, most of it, and so they keep running and narrowly escape. And then back on the camp, Lori's basically sitting in the rain. She's nervous. She's basically just sitting there waiting for Rick, and Shane tries to comfort her, and we learn that they do have a bit of a history from the last couple weeks. But we also learn that Lori does not want anything to do with him because her husband's back. And there is the end of the 4th issue, guys. Every volume is 6 issues, so we only have 2 more to go, and then that will be it for this one. And I'm going to try and move a little bit fast, guys, because I just don't want it to be a crazy long video. But anyway, starting off issue 5, they're all doing gun practice, and we can tell that definitely Andrea there's something special about her. She's getting the knack of it really well. And also, Rick starts letting Carl shoot, and he even tells Carl that he's going to let him carry the gun around. Of course, that he'll be in trouble if he ever pulls it out when it's not necessary, but Rick wants Carl to be able to protect himself if he ever needs to. And Lori's not actually very happy about this, but right now, she's not completely putting an end to it. So after that, it's a few days later, and it's actually snowing, so Rick, Dale, and Shane, they go out to the woods to get some firewood, and Rick makes the slightest little hint to that argument Shane and Rick had, and then Shane literally goes off. Like, he goes on this little mini tangent where he's just yelling at Rick in front of everybody, and, alright, it might be just in front of Dale and Rick, though, but it's still definitely like, whoa, what's going on here? Yeah, that scene was just in front of Dale, so it's not like it was in front of everybody, but still. Anyway, our next scene, they're back at the camp. It's nighttime now. They've built a fire. They're eating, and they all tell each other's backstories. They share their stories with each other, and it's really nice. Anyway, Andrea and Amy, they share their story, and then Amy says, yo, I gotta pee, and she gets up, she goes to the camper, but then a zombie fucking attacks her, and pretty much just bites her throat out. Amy gets bit, and then there's just a bunch of commotion. Everybody starts freaking out. People are screaming. People are shooting. There's a bunch of zombies coming into the camp. There's like 13, 14 zombies that have wound up in the camp, and they're causing chaos. And there's this one point where Lori is trying to kill one of the zombies that's right in front of her, and she drops her gun, but then Carl does some badass shit and he saves her. And pretty much the other main thing that happens in that part is Jim gets attacked by a zombie. I think the zombie kind of like throws him to the ground, but Jim gets over him. He starts just using like the butt of his gun or whatever it's called, and he just beats the zombie's head and going crazy like, "You killed my family, you killed my family." That's pretty much what happened to Jim. He was a survivor of Atlanta. But he was in Atlanta with his whole family, like extended family, and they all got eaten, and he was the only one who survived. So that's pretty sad. And then it's over. Jim's like the last one. He's the one who kills the last zombie pretty much, and it's over. They calm down a little bit, but then it's found out Jim was bitten. And that is the ending of the 5th issue, guys. We got one more issue left, so bear with me for this last issue. This is issue 6. Alright, guys, issue 6 starts off with the burial of Amy. It's kind of sad. We almost heard nothing at all from Amy. She only had a couple, like, dialogue boxes, but she still, there wasn't anything wrong with her. She was an okay, little beginning character right there, but yeah, all the characters have something to say about her. It's a little bit sentimental, but then in our next scene, we can see Jim's illness from the zombie bite is progressing, and he's getting more and more ill. And he's clearly not going to live for much longer. Then Shane and Rick are hunting, and Rick's taking Carl along with him. And basically they're just talking, and then Rick says one thing again, and Shane starts screaming in his face. He starts blowing up, and it starts a big argument, a much worse argument than before. Clearly the drama is building. It even sends Carl away crying. Like, he starts running away like, ah! Then we have a very short scene with Andrea and Dale, just a little bit awkward, and then we have a scene with Jim again, and basically Jim says to the person talking, I think it's Donna, and he says, just leave me, please just take me somewhere, just let me go, just leave me. Clearly, and he's progressed even worse now, so he's like really on the verge. And he actually wants to turn into a zombie to be able to, he says, maybe I can find my family, so it's kind of weird, but yeah, they leave him to turn. Alright, then it's the next day, and basically Rick wakes up, and Shane says, let me know when you need to go hunting. Carl's like, bring me along. Rick's like, no. Shane's like, why not bring him along? And then Rick basically says, we need to talk. That's why. And Shane says, what do we need to talk about? And then Rick starts screaming at Shane, and Shane fucking punches Rick. After he punches the shit out of him, he starts screaming at Rick, and Lori comes after Shane, and she scratches in his face, and then she goes to Rick, starts telling Rick, oh, are you okay? And then she yells at Shane. She says, what the fuck is wrong with you? And Shane just kind of sits there speechless like, and everybody's just kind of like, Shane's like, and everybody else is like, and then Shane actually starts crying, and then he runs away into the forest. Rick actually runs right after Shane, and when he goes up to Shane is like totally gone crazy. He points a shotgun right at Rick. His eyes are like totally classic crazy eyes. He starts ranting at Rick. He says something like, are you gonna pull my heart out of my chest? And Rick doesn't totally understand what happened, like with him and Lori, Shane and Lori, but he's starting to put pieces together, and he's being suspicious about it now, right around this point. And I think he even has been a little bit before that. Like I said, Shane is going absolutely crazy. He's ranting at Rick. He's saying, I have no friends, I have no respect, I have no family. He says, then, you were in the coma, and he basically says, things were starting to look better, and then he says, I thought the army was going to come, but it's been so long. He just starts going crazy, naming all these things that are building up inside of him, and he's blaming Rick for a lot of it, really. So yeah, Shane has already totally lost it, and then he's really about to shoot Rick. Rick's like, please, please, and then Carl shoots him. Carl shoots Shane right through the neck. Then we get a really sad scene with Shane. He's dead on the ground. Carl ran to Rick and embraced him, and he says to Rick, it's not the same as killing the dead ones, Dad. It's pretty sad. It's really sad. And I'll be honest, guys, Oh, and that is the very end of the 6th issue. That is the end of the 1st volume, and that is also the last issue drawn by Tony Moore. From now on, it's going to be Charlie Adlard, and we'll talk more about that in the next video and the videos to come. But yeah, I gotta be honest, I think the show actually, one of the best things that they did and changed was they did Shane a lot better. It made more sense that Shane got crazy towards the end because he was around a lot longer. But you know, Shane also does have his motivations for why he went crazy in the comics, and it also all happened really quickly. So of course that caused Shane to experience all those emotions a lot quicker. So yes, that could have been sent him off. But yeah, it's a little bit hard to believe that Shane would suddenly go like that. But of course, he was kind of in love with Lori. He kind of says that when he's ranting at Rick. He was kind of in love with Lori. He really wanted to maybe even start a family with her, you know, because he thought Rick was dead just like everybody else. But then Rick came back. Lori didn't like it, wasn't liking him. The army wasn't coming. All that stuff was building up for Shane. It made him go like that. But like I said, I think in the show, the Shane and Rick storyline was better, except for the way Lori acted. Like a lot of people have said in the show, she kind of caused it in the show. You know, she was doing this love triangle shit with the three of them. But I do think the Rick and Shane stuff was better in the show. When Shane died in the show, I think it was really good. And my favorite part is when Shane and Rick have the fight. When Shane almost dies, he's stuck in the bus and everything. And you know, when Rick finally comes back to actually save him. And there's a lot more things building up for Shane in the TV show too. But yeah, I do still really like the way it happened in The Walking Dead, and I think it was really a great first volume and a great way to end the first volume. It was really a good ending, and it definitely moves a lot faster than the show at this point, at least. And like I said, even though it might not be quite as good as what the show did with some of that stuff, it was definitely good, and I definitely liked it. I would give this, definitely you should buy this. Definitely you should go out there and buy this. But if you're not, I will have more videos with the upcoming volumes as well. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.